The lecture hall of the Kepler Station Xenobiological Studies Institute buzzed with the quiet conversations of 24 different species. The massive amphitheater, carved from a single asteroid and equipped with atmospheric controls for every known breathing gas combination, was a testament to the Galactic Council's commitment to education. Students from across the galaxy came here to learn about the mysteries of life in all its forms. Professor Kethvar adjusted his teaching apparatus with one of his 4 manipulator arms while his other hands organized his data tablets. The hegemony scholar was considered one of the foremost experts on extreme environment biology, his purple carapace marked with the ritual scars that indicated his academic achievements. His compound eyes swept across his students, taking in the familiar sight of the galaxy's future scientists. There was Zila, 9, the Andromedan whose crystalline body refracted the classroom's light into rainbow patterns across the walls. Next to her sat Grumtok, a methane-breathing boglite whose environmental suit made soft hissing sounds as it regulated his atmosphere. The Vorth delegation occupied the back rows, their silicon-based forms requiring no chairs as they simply anchored themselves to the floor with mineral extensions. And in the middle of it all, looking completely out of place, sat the human. Marcus Chen was an oddity among oddities. While most species sent their best and brightest to Kepler Station, Earth's contribution to the xenobiological program seemed almost random. The human was neither particularly large nor small by galactic standards, his brown hair constantly messy despite what appeared to be regular grooming attempts. His species' primitive clothing hung loose on his frame, and he had a habit of taking notes with an actual physical writing implement on paper, a practice so archaic that several students had initially thought it was some sort of religious ritual. But what truly set Marcus apart was his questions. While other students asked about cellular structures or environmental adaptations, the human had a disturbing tendency to ask about survival in situations that were, by definition, unsurvivable. Just last week, he had inquired about the theoretical possibility of biological life existing in the event horizon of a black hole. The week before that, he had wanted to know if there were any known organisms that could survive direct impact with a stellar core. Professor Kethvar had begun to suspect that humans might not fully grasp the concept of death. Today's lecture was supposed to be straightforward, a review of cosmic phenomena that represented absolute barriers to organic life. These were the well-established facts that every civilized species had learned through bitter experience. There were forces in the universe so destructive, so fundamentally hostile to the delicate chemical processes that enabled life, that even the most hardy organisms could not survive them. Today we will discuss magnetic storms, Kethvar began, his vocal translator rendering his clicks and chirps into the common galactic language. These phenomena represent one of the most significant threats to organic life in the known universe. He activated the holographic display at the center of the amphitheater. The air shimmered and resolved into a 3-dimensional representation of a solar system being struck by a massive electromagnetic storm. The visualization was both beautiful and terrifying. Waves of charged particles cascaded through space like a cosmic tsunami, their energy levels represented by shifting colors that ranged from deep purple to brilliant white. Magnetic storms occur when stellar events, solar flares, magnetosphere collapses, or cosmic ray bombardments create massive waves of electromagnetic energy, the professor continued. These storms can strip atmospheric layers from planets, induce electrical failures in all known technology, and cause immediate cellular breakdown in any organic life form they encounter. The hologram zoomed in to show the molecular level effects. Cellular structures dissolved under the electromagnetic assault, their delicate electrical bonds overwhelmed by the storm's energy. DNA helixes unraveled like broken springs. Protein chains collapsed into their component atoms. The energy levels involved are beyond comprehension, Kethvar explained. A Class 1 magnetic storm, the weakest category, carries approximately 10 to the 15th power joules of energy per cubic meter. For comparison, that is roughly equivalent to detonating a fusion warhead every second in a space the size of this classroom. Several students shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Grungtok's environmental suit increased its protective field strength with an audible hum. Class 7 storms, the highest category we have recorded, carry energy levels that can literally tear apart molecular bonds through electromagnetic induction alone. No known shielding technology can protect against direct exposure to such forces. No biological adaptation has ever been observed that could provide resistance to these energy levels. The professor paused for effect, letting the implications sink in. The official protocols of every spacefaring civilization are identical when magnetic storms are detected. Immediate evacuation to a minimum safe distance of 1 light-year, followed by deep underground shelter or complete system abandonment until the phenomenon passes. D. He looked around the classroom, satisfied that his students understood the gravity of the subject. The simple fact is that magnetic storms represent an absolute barrier to life. No organic being can survive direct exposure and live to... Excuse me, Professor. The voice came from the middle of the classroom. Kethvar's compound eyes rotated to focus on the source of the interruption, though he already knew who it would be. The human had raised his hand in the primitive gesture his species used to request attention. Yes, Mr. Chen? Marcus lowered his hand and leaned forward slightly in his chair. I was wondering about the methodology used to determine that survival is impossible. Have there been controlled studies with voluntary subjects, or is this conclusion based on observational data from accidental exposures? The question sent a ripple of what might charitably be called concern through the classroom. Zila, Nine's crystalline form, flickered with what her species used to indicate confusion. Grumtalk's breathing apparatus made a sound that his translator rendered as worried incredulity. Professor Kethvar clicked his mandibles together in a gesture equivalent to a human clearing their throat. Mr. Chen, the conclusion is based on fundamental physics. The electromagnetic energy levels involved in magnetic storms are incompatible with the molecular bonds that enable organic chemistry. No controlled study is necessary because survival would require a suspension of the laws of thermodynamics. But, Marcus continued, apparently undaunted by the professor's explanation, humans have survived some pretty intense electromagnetic exposure. Lightning strikes, for example, or electromagnetic pulse weapons. Our nervous systems are basically electrical circuits, right? Maybe there's some kind of adaptation mechanism we haven't fully explored. The classroom fell silent. Professor Kethvar felt his teaching apparatus quiver slightly, an involuntary response that occurred when his species encountered something that challenged their understanding of reality. Mr. Chen, he said carefully, lightning strikes generate approximately 1 billion volts of electricity lasting for a few microseconds. The total energy involved is roughly equivalent to powering a single human dwelling for a few days. A class. One magnetic storm generates energy levels that are 10 million times greater and can last for standard weeks. The comparison is inadequate. Marcus nodded thoughtfully, as if the professor had just provided helpful clarification rather than explaining why his question was based on a fundamental misunderstanding of scale. So the main difference is duration and intensity. But what if someone could find a way to channel or redirect the electromagnetic energy instead of just absorbing it, like a lightning rod but for cosmic storms? Silence that followed this question was different from the previous one, where before there had been confusion and concern, now there was something approaching horror. The very idea that someone might voluntarily expose themselves to a magnetic storm was so far outside the realm of reasonable behavior that most of the students lacked a conceptual framework to process it. Professor Kethvar realized that this was what the humans called a teachable moment. He had heard about their species' unusual relationship with dangerous situations, but he had assumed the reports were exaggerated. Now he understood that they might have been understated. Mr. Chen, he said, activating the holographic display again. This time, the image showed a detailed cross-section of organic tissue being exposed to electromagnetic radiation. Please observe what happens to cellular structures under electromagnetic stress. The hologram zoomed in to the molecular level. Individual cells appeared like tiny cities, their complex internal structures visible in perfect detail. Then the electromagnetic energy struck them. It was not a gentle process. The cellular membranes ruptured instantly, their electrical charges overwhelmed by the external field. Mitochondria exploded like tiny grenades as their energy storage systems overloaded. DNA strands snapped apart at their weakest points, their genetic information dissolving into component nucleotides. The electromagnetic field induces electrical currents in any conductive material, Professor Kethvar explained as the destruction continued in slow motion. In organic tissue, this means that every cell becomes a microscopic electrical generator producing far more current than it can handle. The result is immediate and complete cellular death on a scale that makes recovery impossible. Marcus watched the display with the same expression he might use to observe an interesting but ultimately solvable engineering problem. What about the electrical current flow patterns? Are they random, or do they follow predictable paths based on tissue conductivity? The professor's mandibles clicked together rapidly, a sign of extreme agitation. Chen, the current flow patterns are irrelevant because The organism would be dead within the first nanosecond of exposure. Right, but hypothetically, Marcus continued, if someone could predict the current flow and maybe provide alternative pathways for the electrical discharge, like grounding cables or conductive mesh woven into protective gear, couldn't that reduce the damage to survivable levels? Professor Kethvar stared at his human student for a long moment. Around the classroom, various species were displaying their equivalent of shocked disbelief. The Vorth delegation had actually retreated further into their mineral anchors, as if the humans' questions posed some kind of existential threat. Mr. Chen, the professor said finally, are you suggesting that someone might deliberately attempt to survive direct exposure to a magnetic storm? Marcus shrugged, a gesture that somehow managed to convey both casual confidence and complete disregard for personal safety. I'm just saying that calling something impossible usually means we haven't tried hard enough to solve it yet. Every impossible problem is really just an engineering challenge that nobody's figured out how to approach properly. The classroom erupted in what could generously be called discussion, but more accurately resembled mass panic. Students from a dozen different species began talking at once, their translators creating a cacophony of overlapping voices expressing various forms of disbelief, concern, and outright terror at the humans' casual attitude toward cosmic-level destruction. Professor Kethvar raised all four of his arms for silence, a gesture that gradually brought the chaos under control. When the classroom finally settled down, he looked directly at Marcus Chen and spoke with the careful precision of someone trying to prevent an interstellar incident. Mr. Chen, I want to be absolutely clear about this. Magnetic storms are not engineering problems. They are fundamental forces of nature that represent absolute barriers to biological existence. No species in the galaxy has ever survived direct exposure. No technology has ever been developed that could provide protection. The energy levels involved are beyond anything that biological evolution could possibly adapt to survive. Marcus nodded politely, but his expression suggested that he was filing the professor's explanation under interesting challenges rather than insurmountable obstacles. I understand the current scientific consensus, he said, but consensus can change when new approaches are tried. Has anyone ever attempted to study survival techniques, or have all the conclusions been theoretical? The question hung in the air like a live explosive device. Professor Kethvar realized that he was facing a fundamental cultural disconnect. The human genuinely did not understand why deliberately exposing oneself to lethal cosmic phenomena was not considered a valid research methodology. Mr. Chen, he said slowly, the reason no survival studies have been conducted is that such studies would be classified as suicide missions. No ethics board in the galaxy would approve research that guaranteed the death of the test subjects. But what if the test subject volunteered? Marcus asked. What if someone was willing to try experimental protective measures, knowing that failure meant death but success might save lives in the future? The classroom fell silent again, but this time the silence had a different quality. It was the silence of minds trying to process an idea so foreign to their experience that they lacked the cognitive tools to evaluate it. The concept of voluntary exposure to certain death for the sake of scientific advancement was simply outside their species' range of understanding. Professor Kethvar looked at his human student and realized that he was staring at something that might be unique in the galaxy. A member of a species that viewed certain death not as an insurmountable obstacle, but as an acceptable risk in the pursuit of knowledge. Mr. Chen, he said finally, I think we need to schedule a private consultation to discuss your academic goals. Marcus smiled, an expression that his species used to indicate pleasure but which, in context, looked disturbingly similar to a predator selecting its prey. That would be great, Professor. I have some ideas about magnetic storm survival that I'd love to discuss in detail. As the class session ended and students began filing out of the amphitheater, Professor Kethvar remained at his teaching station, staring at the space where Marcus Chen had been sitting. Around him, the holographic display continued to show the molecular destruction caused by electromagnetic radiation, but now the images seemed less like scientific education and more like a preview of an approaching catastrophe. The professor had the distinct feeling that he had just witnessed the beginning of something that would challenge everything the galaxy thought it knew about the limits of biological survival. Whether that something would be classified as scientific breakthrough or cosmic-scale tragedy remained to be seen. Outside the classroom, Marcus Chen walked through the corridors of Kepler Station, already making mental notes about material science, electromagnetic field theory, and the interesting challenge of surviving something that every intelligent species in the galaxy considered absolutely impossible. He was looking forward to the private consultation with Professor Kethvar. He had quite a few questions about the specific characteristics of magnetic storms, and he was beginning to form some ideas about how to test his theories. After all, somebody had to be the first to try. Professor Kefvar's private office occupied a corner section of Kepler Station's research wing, its transparent aluminum walls providing a spectacular view of the asteroid field that surrounded the educational facility. The space was filled with the accumulated knowledge of a career spent studying the extremes of biological survival, with specimen containers, research data crystals, and holographic models covering every available surface. Marcus Chen sat across from the professor's desk in what had become an increasingly uncomfortable silence. The human had arrived precisely on time for their scheduled consultation, carrying a battered data pad and what appeared to be several sheets of his primitive paper covered in handwritten calculations. Professor Kefvar had spent the previous evening reviewing everything the Galactic Council's files contained about human biology, psychology, and cultural development. The results had been both fascinating and deeply concerning. Humans appeared to be the only known species that actively sought out dangerous situations for recreational purposes. They had documented cases of individuals deliberately exposing themselves to extreme environmental conditions, not for survival necessity, but for what their files described as fun. The professor's own species had evolved on a world where caution meant survival and recklessness meant death. The concept of voluntary risk-taking for its own sake was so alien to him that he struggled to process it rationally. "Mr. Chen," he began finally, "I have reviewed your academic record and your species' general biological and psychological profiles. I must admit that I find myself at a loss to understand your motivation for pursuing research into magnetic storm survival." Marcus looked up from the notes he had been organizing on his lap. "Well, it's an interesting problem. Plus, if we could figure out how to survive magnetic storms, it would open up huge areas of space for exploration and colonization. Right now, any system with stellar instability is basically off limits." The professor clicked his mandibles thoughtfully. "Mr. Chen, perhaps I have not been sufficiently clear about the nature of magnetic storms. These are not simply dangerous weather patterns that might be avoided with proper precautions. They are manifestations of cosmic forces operating at energy levels that dwarf the total power output of most stars." He activated a small holographic projector on his desk, creating a three-dimensional star chart that showed the locations of known magnetic storm events over the past 1,000 years. Red markers indicated systems where storms had been observed, while gray zones marked regions where entire civilizations had been forced to relocate due to recurring electromagnetic phenomena.
"Observe the pattern," Professor Kefvar said, highlighting a cluster of red markers in the Sagittarius arm.
This region was once home to the Keltharian Empire, a spacefaring civilization with technology levels comparable to our own. When the storms began occurring in their home system, they attempted to shelter their population in underground facilities. The hologram shifted to show cross-sectional views of a planet's surface. Deep beneath the ground, vast cavern complexes appeared, their walls lined with what appeared to be sophisticated shielding technology. The Keltharians built shelters extending 15 kilometers below their planet's surface, protected by electromagnetic barriers that could deflect the output of a medium-sized star. On the class, 5 storms struck their system. The electromagnetic pulse penetrated their shielding as if it were not there. The display showed the storm's effects in devastating detail. The electromagnetic wave passed through solid rock as if it were empty space, its energy field inducing electrical currents in every conductive material it encountered. The Keltharian shelters became massive electrical circuits, their protective barriers transformed into focusing arrays that concentrated the storm's power into the very spaces they were meant to protect. The electromagnetic induction heated the shelter walls to plasma temperatures within seconds, the professor continued. The Keltharians were not killed by direct exposure to the storm, they were vaporized by their own protective technology. Marcus studied the holographic display with obvious interest, but his expression remained thoughtful rather than horrified. So the problem was that they tried to block the electromagnetic field instead of redirecting it. What if someone tried to channel the energy away from protected areas instead of stopping it? Professor Kefvar felt his compound eyes rotate independently, an involuntary response that occurred when his species encountered logical processes that exceeded their comprehension parameters. "Chen," he said carefully, "you seem to be approaching this as if magnetic storms were merely very large engineering problems. I assure you that this is not the case. The energy levels involved exceed the theoretical limits of material science." "But what about biological materials?" Marcus asked, pulling out one of his handwritten sheets. "I've been looking at the electromagnetic properties of human nervous tissue, and there are some interesting possibilities." He spread the paper on the professor's desk, revealing a complex diagram that appeared to map electrical conductivity patterns through various types of biological tissue. The calculations were primitive by galactic standards, but they demonstrated a level of detailed analysis that was impressive for someone working with such basic tools. Human nervous systems are basically electrical circuits, Marcus explained, pointing to various sections of his diagram. Our neurons communicate through electrical impulses, and our muscle coordination depends on precise electromagnetic field control. We're already walking electromagnetic devices. Professor Kethvar examined the human's calculations, his academic curiosity overriding his growing sense of alarm. The work was crude but conceptually sound. The human had correctly identified the electrical properties of his own nervous system and had begun calculating how those properties might interact with external electromagnetic fields. "Your analysis is surprisingly accurate," the professor admitted. "However, you appear to have overlooked the scale factors involved. The electromagnetic fields in your nervous system operate at voltage levels measured in millivolts. Magnetic storms generate field strengths measured in kilovolts per meter." "Right, but what about current distribution?" Marcus asked, producing another sheet covered in calculations. "If the electromagnetic field could be channeled through a network of high-conductivity pathways, the current density in critical biological areas might be reduced to survivable levels." The professor stared at the human's second diagram, which showed a rough schematic of what appeared to be a biological organism surrounded by a complex network of conductive pathways. The design was primitive, but the underlying principle was sound. If electromagnetic current could be directed through carefully placed conductors, the energy might be dispersed before it could cause fatal damage to vital organs. "Mr. Chen," he said slowly, "are you proposing to turn a living organism into a type of lightning rod?" Marcus nodded enthusiastically. "Exactly. If you could create a network of high-conductivity paths through and around the body, the storm's electrical energy would follow those paths instead of randomly destroying cellular structures. It would be like giving the electromagnetic field a preferred route to ground." Professor Kethvar sat back in his chair, his four manipulator arms unconsciously arranging his data tablets into defensive positions. The human's proposal was simultaneously brilliant and terrifying. The theoretical framework was sound, but the practical implementation would require someone to voluntarily expose themselves to electromagnetic fields that could potentially reduce them to their component atoms. "Mr. Chen," he said finally, "even if your theoretical framework is correct, the practical challenges would be enormous. You would need to map the exact electromagnetic characteristics of the test subject's biology, design and install a comprehensive network of conductors that could handle massive electrical loads, and then somehow test the system under conditions that would instantly kill the subject if any component failed. But those are all solvable engineering problems. The real question is whether the basic concept is viable." The professor looked at his human student and realized that he was witnessing something unprecedented in galactic history. Every known species had approached cosmic phenomena with appropriate respect for their destructive potential. They built better shelters, developed more sophisticated early warning systems, and perfected evacuation procedures. None of them had ever considered the possibility of directly confronting forces that operated on cosmic scales. "Mr. Chen," he said, "I must ask you a direct question. Are you seriously considering volunteering to test these theories personally?" Marcus was quiet for a moment, his expression shifting to something more serious. "Professor, my species has a saying, someone has to be first. Every major advance in our history happened because someone was willing to try something that everyone else thought was impossible. Flying, space travel, nuclear energy, genetic engineering, all of them started with someone deciding that the conventional wisdom was wrong. But those were not situations involving certain death," Professor Kethvar protested. "Actually, they usually were," Marcus replied. "The first pilots died in crashes. The first astronauts died in explosions. The first researchers working with radiation died from exposure. But each failure taught us something that made the next attempt more likely to succeed. Eventually, someone figured out how to make it work." The professor realized that he was confronting a fundamental difference in evolutionary psychology. His own species had survived by being cautious, by avoiding unnecessary risks, by treating survival as the highest priority. Humans appeared to have survived by being willing to accept mortality in exchange for advancement. "Mr. Chen," he said, "what you are proposing is not comparable to early aviation or space exploration. This is exposure to cosmic forces that operate beyond the scale of planetary civilizations. If your calculations are wrong, or if your equipment fails, you would not simply die. You would be obliterated so completely that there would be nothing left to study." Marcus nodded thoughtfully. "That's definitely a risk. But the potential benefits are enormous. If someone could prove that biological life can survive magnetic storms, it would revolutionize our understanding of both electromagnetic physics and biological adaptation. Plus, it would open up huge areas of space that are currently uninhabitable. Professor Kethvar stared at his student for a long moment, trying to process the casual way the human discussed his own potential obliteration. The logical frameworks that governed his species' behavior simply did not include categories for this type of decision-making. Mr. Beta-Duadzakt, Chen, he said finally, I cannot in good conscience provide academic support for what amounts to an elaborate suicide attempt. But what if it wasn't suicide? Marcus asked. What if there was a real chance of survival based on solid scientific principles? The professor looked down at the human's calculations scattered across his desk. The work was primitive but conceptually sound. The theoretical framework was actually quite elegant in its simplicity. If the practical implementation could be perfected, it might provide a pathway for biological survival under electromagnetic conditions that had previously been considered absolutely lethal. Mr. Chen, he said slowly. Hypothetically speaking, if someone were to attempt such an experiment, they would need to conduct extensive preliminary testing to validate the theoretical framework. They would need to develop and test electromagnetic shielding technologies under controlled conditions. They would need to map their biological electromagnetic characteristics with unprecedented precision. Marcus leaned forward, obviously sensing that the professor was moving from absolutely not toward theoretically possible, and they would need to find a way to test the system using gradually increasing electromagnetic field strengths, the professor continued, allowing for multiple iterations and improvements before attempting exposure to storm-level energies. Exactly, Marcus said. Start small, learn from each test, and gradually work up to higher energy levels. Build confidence in the system before betting everything on it. Professor Kethvar felt a familiar sensation that his species associated with making decisions that would have far-reaching consequences. His academic training told him that the human's proposal was theoretically sound. His survival instincts told him that encouraging such research was dangerously irresponsible. His scientific curiosity told him that this might be the most significant research opportunity of his career. Mr. Chen, he said finally, if, and I emphasize if, you were to pursue this research, it would need to be conducted under strict scientific protocols. Every stage would need to be carefully documented. Every test would need to include comprehensive safety measures and failure protocols. Marcus nodded eagerly. Absolutely. Complete scientific rigor throughout the process. And, the professor continued, you would need to understand that this institution cannot officially sanction research that involves deliberately exposing students to potentially lethal electromagnetic fields. I understand, Marcus said. This would have to be independent research. Professor Kethvar looked out through his office's transparent aluminum windows at the asteroid field surrounding Kepler Station. Somewhere out there, cosmic forces were building that could destroy entire civilizations without regard for their technological achievements or cultural sophistication. And here in his office sat a member of a species so young that they still used paper for calculations, calmly discussing plans to personally confront those forces. Mr. Makwina, Chen, he said, I want you to understand that if you pursue this course of action, you will be attempting something that no intelligent being in galactic history has ever tried. You will be venturing into territory that every known species has learned to avoid. If you succeed, you will have achieved something that will revolutionize our understanding of biological survival. If you fail, if I fail, hopefully someone will learn enough from my mistakes to do better next time, Marcus finished. The professor clicked his mandibles together in a pattern that indicated thoughtful consideration mixed with profound concern. Very well, Mr. Chen. I will provide you with access to the academic databases you will need for your research. I will also provide guidance on experimental protocols and safety procedures, but I want it clearly understood that this is independent research being conducted at your own risk. Marcus stood up and gathered his primitive papers, his expression showing obvious satisfaction with the outcome of their consultation. Thank you, Professor. I really appreciate your support. As the human headed toward the office door, Professor Kethvar called after him. Mr. Chen, may I ask one final question? What makes you believe that humans are capable of surviving something that has killed every other species that has encountered it? Marcus paused at the doorway and looked back at his professor. Because we're too stubborn to know when we're supposed to give up. After the human left, Professor Kethvar remained in his office staring at the calculations that Marcus had left behind. The work was crude, but showed genuine insight into electromagnetic physics and biological systems. If the human could refine his theoretical framework and develop practical implementation methods, he might actually have a chance of survival. The professor realized that he was about to become involved in what would either be the most significant scientific breakthrough in galactic history or the most elaborate suicide ever attempted by an intelligent species. He began drafting research protocols for electromagnetic exposure testing, wondering if he was helping to advance the boundaries of scientific knowledge or simply planning the documentation for an unprecedented academic disaster. Outside his office, Marcus Chen walked through the corridors of Kepler Station, already making mental lists of the resources he would need for his research. He had work to do, theories to test, and equipment to design. Somewhere in the galaxy, magnetic storms were building, carrying energies that could reduce entire star systems to electromagnetic chaos. Soon, those storms would encounter something they had never met before, a human being who refused to accept that survival was impossible. The galaxy was about to learn that there were some forces even more dangerous than cosmic electromagnetic storms. Forces like human curiosity, human stubbornness, and the absolute refusal to let little things like the laws of physics prevent them from trying something interesting. Professor Kefvar was right about one thing. Someone had to be first, and Marcus Chen was looking forward to the opportunity. 3 months after his consultation with Professor Kefvar, Marcus Chen had transformed an unused storage bay in Kepler Station's research section into something that looked like a cross between a laboratory and a medieval torture chamber. The space was filled with electromagnetic field generators, biological monitoring equipment, and what appeared to be an alarming collection of conductive cables, metal mesh, and experimental apparatus. Word of the Humans Project had spread through the station's academic community despite Professor Kethvar's attempts to keep the research confidential. The reaction had been predictably mixed. Most faculty members treated the whole thing as an elaborate form of species-specific mental breakdown. Several had suggested that Marcus be placed under psychological observation for his own protection. A few, however, had begun providing quiet assistance in the form of equipment loans, technical advice, and access to restricted databases. The most surprising support had come from Dr. Zilkorth, a hegemony materials scientist whose own research focused on electromagnetic resistant alloys. The elderly scholar had initially approached Marcus to explain why his proposed experiments were physically impossible, but had ended up becoming fascinated by the human's unconventional approach to electromagnetic engineering. "Your species' understanding of material science is primitive," Dr. Zilkorth had told Marcus during one of their early conversations, "but your intuitive grasp of electromagnetic field dynamics is remarkable. You think about electricity the way most species think about water flow." Now the two researchers worked together several hours each day, combining the hegemony scientists' advanced theoretical knowledge with Marcus's practical approach to problem solving. Their collaboration had produced several breakthrough innovations in conductor design and field distribution systems. The centerpiece of their work was what Marcus had termed the grounding grid, a network of ultra-thin conductive fibers that could be integrated directly into biological tissue. The fibers were made from a hegemony alloy that could handle massive electrical loads while remaining flexible enough to move with living muscle and organ systems. The theoretical current-carrying capacity is impressive, Dr. Zilkorth admitted as he examined their latest prototype under a microscopic scanner. These fibers could theoretically channel electromagnetic energy levels approaching storm intensities without structural failure. Marcus looked up from the biological simulation he was running on a borrowed computer system. "What about biocompatibility? Will organic tissue tolerate direct contact with the conductor network?" "That remains the primary unknown, Dr. Desina," Zilkorth replied. "Your species' medical databases indicate that humans have successfully integrated various foreign materials into their bodies, but never anything approaching this scale or complexity. The integration challenge was indeed formidable." Marcus's design called for thousands of hair-thin conductors to be woven through his body's muscle groups, nervous system, and major organs. Each conductor had to be precisely positioned to intercept electromagnetic current before it could damage critical biological functions, while simultaneously avoiding interference with normal physiological processes. "We are essentially proposing to turn you into a hybrid organic electrical system," Dr. Zilkorth observed. "No known medical procedure has ever attempted anything comparable." Marcus had spent weeks studying human anatomy texts, mapping out conductor placement routes that would provide maximum electromagnetic protection while minimizing biological disruption. His calculations showed that the conductor network would need to integrate with virtually every major organ system, creating redundant pathways for electrical current that would prevent any single biological component from bearing fatal electrical loads. The medical challenges were complicated by the fact that no physician in the galaxy had experience with the type of surgery Marcus was proposing. Human medical knowledge was considered primitive by galactic standards, while advanced medical technologies were designed for species with completely different physiologies. The solution had come from an unexpected source, Dr. Yithmel, a cybernetics specialist who normally worked on integrating artificial components into crystalline Vorth physiology. The elderly surgeon had approached Marcus after hearing about his project through the station's academic rumor network. "Your proposal is medically insane," Dr. Yithmel had told him bluntly. "But the technical challenges are fascinating. I have never attempted to integrate conductive systems into organic biology, but the principles should be similar to my work with mineral-based cybernetics." After reviewing Marcus's anatomical charts and conductor placement designs, Dr. Yithmel had agreed to develop surgical procedures for the integration process. The work would require dozens of separate operations, each one installing small sections of the conductor network and allowing time for biological adaptation before proceeding to the next phase. "We will need to monitor your body's response to each conductor installation," she explained during one of their planning sessions. "Foreign material integration can trigger immune responses that could be fatal if not properly managed." Marcus had undergone the first series of test installations 2 weeks earlier. Small sections of conductor fiber had been integrated into non-critical muscle groups in his arms and legs, allowing the researchers to study how his biology responded to the foreign materials. The results had been encouraging. His immune system had initially reacted to the conductors as foreign objects, but had gradually adapted to treat them as permanent body components. "Your species' biological adaptability is remarkable," Dr. Stevenand Yithmel had observed as she reviewed the test results. "Most species would have rejected the foreign materials completely. Humans appear to have unusual tolerance for biological modification." The test installations had also allowed Marcus to experiment with low-level electromagnetic exposure. Using carefully controlled field generators, he had exposed the conductor-integrated areas of his body to gradually increasing electromagnetic energies. The conductors had performed exactly as designed, channeling electrical current away from biological tissue and toward grounding points connected to the laboratory's electrical systems. "Current distribution is following predicted pathways, Doctor," Zilkorth had reported during one of their electromagnetic tests. "The biological tissue shows no signs of electrical damage even at field strengths that would normally cause cellular breakdown." But the test installations represented only a tiny fraction of the conductor network that would be needed for full-scale magnetic storm protection. Marcus's complete design called for nearly 10,000 individual conductor fibers distributed throughout his body, each one precisely positioned to intercept electromagnetic energy before it could reach critical organs. The installation process would take months to complete and would require Marcus to undergo surgery while maintaining his normal academic schedule. Professor Kethvar had arranged for him to audit advanced courses in electromagnetic physics and extreme environment biology while continuing his conductor integration procedures. "You realize," the professor had told him during one of their weekly progress reviews, "that you are essentially volunteering to become a living experiment in the limits of biological modification. No one knows what the long-term effects of your conductor network will be." "That's true," Marcus had agreed, "but someone has to be the first test case. We'll never know what's possible until someone tries it." The academic community's reaction to Marcus's progress had shifted from skeptical concern to fascinated horror. His electromagnetic exposure tests had produced results that challenged fundamental assumptions about biological survival limits. Several faculty members had begun attending his research presentations, treating them as a combination of scientific conference and morbid curiosity exhibition. What the human is accomplishing should be impossible. Dr. Renthval, a specialist in extreme environment biology, had commented after observing one of Marcus's electromagnetic tests. "He is exposing living tissue to energy levels that should cause immediate cellular death, yet his biological functions remain stable." Word of the research had also reached the Galactic Council's scientific oversight committees. Marcus had received several official communications expressing concern about the potential risks of his experiments, along with formal requests for detailed safety protocols and risk assessments. "The Council is not attempting to prevent your research," Professor Kethvar had explained after reviewing the official correspondence. "But they want assurance that your experiments will not pose risks to station personnel or equipment." Marcus had submitted comprehensive safety documentation demonstrating that his electromagnetic tests were carefully controlled and posed no danger to anyone except himself. The Council had responded with formal approval for continued research, along with requirements for regular progress reports and safety audits. The approval had come with an unexpected benefit: access to advanced Galactic Council databases containing detailed information about magnetic storm characteristics and historical survival attempts. The data had allowed Marcus to refine his theoretical calculations and design specifications for the extreme electromagnetic conditions he would eventually face. Council records show that 17 different species have attempted technological solutions to magnetic storm survival. Professor Kethvar had reported after reviewing the classified databases. All of them failed because they tried to block or deflect the electromagnetic energy. Your approach of channeling and redirecting the energy represents a completely different methodology. The historical data had also revealed the existence of several unexplored star systems where magnetic storms occurred on predictable schedules. These systems offered potential testing environments where Marcus could expose himself to actual cosmic electromagnetic phenomena under controlled conditions. There is a system approximately 50 light-years from here, where Class 3 magnetic storms occur with mathematical regularity. Dr. Zilkorth had discovered during his analysis of the Council databases, the energy levels are significant, but not immediately fatal. It would provide an ideal environment for preliminary testing. Marcus had begun making preliminary plans for an expedition to the storm system. The journey would require a specially modified spacecraft equipped with electromagnetic monitoring equipment and emergency medical facilities. More importantly, it would require him to complete his conductor integration and undergo final system testing before departing Kepler Station. You understand, Dr. Yithmel had told him during their latest surgical consultation, that once the integration process is complete, it cannot be reversed. The conductor network will be permanently incorporated into your biological systems. I understand, Marcus had replied. But honestly, even if I wanted to back out now, I don't think I could. This research has taken on a life of its own. That was certainly true. Marcus's project had grown from a simple academic exercise into something approaching a galactic event. Scientists from across the galaxy had begun following his progress reports, treating his experiments as a test case for the limits of biological adaptation. Several species have begun their own theoretical research into electromagnetic survival, using Marcus's work as a foundation for their investigations. Whether you succeed or fail, Professor Kethvar had observed, your research will advance our understanding of electromagnetic biology by centuries. No one has ever attempted to study these phenomena from the perspective of survival rather than avoidance. Marcus continued his work, driven by a combination of scientific curiosity and the growing realization that he was attempting something that could revolutionize galactic civilization's relationship with cosmic phenomena. Every successful test brought him closer to proving that the impossible was simply a matter of insufficient engineering. The conductor integration process continued, surgery by surgery, test by test. His body was slowly being transformed into something that had never existed before. A hybrid biological electromagnetic system designed to survive forces that operated on cosmic scales. In his private moments, Marcus sometimes wondered if he was pioneering a new form of evolution or simply developing an elaborate way to commit suicide. But those doubts never lasted long. There was too much work to be done, too many problems to solve, and too many opportunities to discover what lay beyond the boundaries of conventional possibility. Somewhere in the galaxy, magnetic storms continued their ancient dance of destruction, carrying energies that could reduce civilizations to electromagnetic chaos. Soon, they would encounter something completely unprecedented, a human being who had deliberately transformed himself into something that could survive their fury. The galaxy was about to learn that evolution was not limited to natural processes. Sometimes, it could be a conscious choice made by someone stubborn enough to refuse to accept that survival was impossible. 6 months after beginning his conductor integration process, Marcus Chen stood on the observation deck of the research vessel Probability's Edge, watching the approach to the Kepler 442 system through reinforced transparent aluminum windows. The star ahead was an unstable yellow giant whose magnetic field fluctuations created predictable electromagnetic storms every 47 standard days. According to Galactic Council records, the system had been abandoned for over 300 years after a failed colonization attempt resulted in the complete loss of a hegemony research expedition. The electromagnetic storms had overwhelmed their shielding technology, leaving nothing but debris orbiting the system's outer planets. Now the system would host a different kind of experiment. For the first time in galactic history, someone was deliberately traveling toward a magnetic storm rather than fleeing from it. Electromagnetic readings are increasing as expected, reported Dr. Zilkorth from his monitoring station. The hegemony scientist had insisted on accompanying the expedition despite the obvious risks to his own safety. Current field strength is approaching class 1 storm levels, but still well within the parameters we established for preliminary testing. Marcus felt the familiar tingling sensation that indicated his conductor network was beginning to activate. Over the past 6 months, his body had been gradually transformed into something that existed nowhere else in the galaxy. Nearly 10,000 ultra-thin conductor fibers now ran through his muscle groups, nervous system, and organ structures, creating a comprehensive electromagnetic distribution system that could theoretically handle energy levels approaching those found in cosmic storms. Each surgical procedure had required weeks of recovery time while his biology adapted to the foreign materials. Several times his immune system had attempted to reject the conductor network, requiring emergency medical interventions to prevent systemic biological failure. "Your species' adaptation mechanisms are remarkable," Dr. Yifmel had observed during one of the more serious rejection episodes. "Most organisms would have died from immune system shock. Humans appear to have evolved unusual tolerance for biological modification." Now, months later, Marcus could barely remember what it felt like to have a purely organic body. The conductor network had become so thoroughly integrated with his physiology that it felt like a natural part of his biological systems. When electromagnetic fields were present, he could actually sense the flow of electrical current through the conductor pathways, like feeling blood circulation, but with electricity instead of biological fluids. "Subject appears physiologically stable," reported Dr. Telmkis, the expedition's medical specialist. The Andromedan physician had originally joined the mission to document Marcus's inevitable death, but had gradually become invested in trying to keep him alive. "Conductor network is distributing electromagnetic load exactly as designed. No signs of cellular damage in critical organ systems." The probabilities edge had been extensively modified for the expedition, equipped with electromagnetic monitoring systems, emergency medical facilities, and the most advanced life support technology available to Galactic Council research missions. The ship's captain, Commander Vex Noel of the Hegemony Space Service, had initially refused to transport what he described as a suicide mission disguised as scientific research. Professor Kethvar had eventually convinced the commander to approve the mission by pointing out that Marcus's research represented the most significant advancement in electromagnetic survival science in galactic history. The potential benefits to spacefaring civilizations were enormous, particularly for exploration of systems with stellar instability. "If the human succeeds," the professor had argued, "we will have access to vast regions of space that are currently uninhabitable due to electromagnetic phenomena. If he fails, we will have comprehensive data about the limits of biological survival that will advance our scientific understanding by centuries." The expedition had been carefully planned to minimize risks to everyone except Marcus himself. The ship would remain at a safe distance from the storm's primary effects while Marcus was transported to the exposure zone in a specially designed shuttle equipped with complete medical monitoring and emergency evacuation systems. "Approaching optimal test distance," announced the ship's navigation officer. "Storm intensity readings indicate Class 2 electromagnetic activity with sustained field strengths approaching theoretical limits for biological exposure." Marcus looked out at the storm through the observation windows and felt a mixture of excitement and terror that he suspected was unique in galactic history. The magnetic storm appeared as a vast wall of shimmering energy extending across millions of kilometers of space, its electromagnetic fields visible as dancing aurora-like patterns that shifted through the entire spectrum of colors. The storm was beautiful, Marcus realized. It was also powerful enough to reduce his body to its component atoms if his calculations were wrong. "Final systems check, Doctor?" Zilkorth called out, reviewing data from the monitoring stations. "Conductor network showing optimal electrical distribution patterns. Grounding systems are functioning within design specifications. Medical monitoring equipment is operating normally." Marcus ran through his own pre-exposure checklist, testing the emergency procedures that would hopefully save his life if his conductor network failed. His survival suit was equipped with redundant life support systems, emergency medical injectors, and a quantum communicator that would allow the medical team to monitor his condition, even if the electromagnetic storm interfered with normal communications. "Mr. Chen," Commander Vexnall announced from the bridge, "you are cleared for shuttle departure. I want you to understand that if your electromagnetic shielding fails, we will not be able to retrieve you until the storm passes." "I understand, Commander," Marcus replied. "If the system fails, there probably won't be anything left to retrieve anyway." The shuttle bay doors opened, revealing the stormlit space beyond. Marcus strapped himself into the pilot's seat of the experimental shuttle, running through final equipment checks while the bay's atmosphere was evacuated around him. "Shuttle systems nominal," he reported to the monitoring team. "Electromagnetic field generators are functioning normally. Medical monitoring is showing stable readings across all biological systems." "You are cleared for departure," Dr. Zilkorth responded. "Remember, if you experience any unexpected symptoms or equipment malfunctions, abort the test immediately and return to the ship. Marcus engaged the shuttle's engines and flew out into space, heading directly toward the magnetic storm. The electromagnetic readings on his instruments climbed steadily as he approached the storm's outer boundaries, but his conductor network continued to function exactly as designed. The first indication that he had entered the storm was a spectacular light show that filled the shuttle's cabin with dancing rainbow patterns. The electromagnetic fields were interacting with the shuttle's hull, creating visible electrical discharges that would have been beautiful if they hadn't represented energy levels that could kill him in microseconds. "Entering storm perimeter," Marcus reported to the monitoring team. "Electromagnetic field strength is now at Class 3 levels. Conductor network is handling the load without problems." Through the shuttle's windows, he could see the storm's effects on the space around him. Cosmic dust particles glowed like tiny stars as electromagnetic energy charged them to incandescence. The shuttle's metal components hummed with induced electrical currents that would have been fatal to any unprotected organic life. "Biological readings remain stable," Dr. Telmkiss reported from the Probability's Edge. "The subject's vital signs are actually improving as the conductor network activates. It appears that the electromagnetic fields are having a stimulating effect on his modified physiology." Marcus could feel the current flowing through his conductor network as the storm's energy found the carefully designed pathways through his body. Instead of randomly destroying his cellular structures, the electromagnetic fields were being channeled along predetermined routes that dispersed their energy safely to the shuttle's grounding systems. "Current distribution is following predicted patterns," he reported. "No pain, no discomfort. The conductor network feels like it's designed for this environment." He pushed deeper into the storm, monitoring his equipment carefully as electromagnetic field strengths increased beyond any level previously survived by biological life. The shuttle's instruments registered energy densities that should have reduced any organic matter to plasma, but Marcus's conductor network continued to function flawlessly. "Storm intensity has reached Class 4 levels," Dr. Zilkorth announced, his voice tight with concentration. "The subject is now experiencing electromagnetic field strengths equivalent to being struck by lightning approximately 1,000 times per second." Marcus realized that he felt better than he had in months. The electromagnetic energy flowing through his conductor network seemed to be energizing his biological systems rather than damaging them. His heart rate was strong and steady, his breathing was deep and regular, and his mental clarity was sharper than he could ever remember experiencing. "Something interesting is happening," he reported to the medical team. "The electromagnetic exposure appears to be having beneficial effects on my physiology. Energy levels are actually increasing rather than depleting. That is consistent with our theoretical predictions," Zilkorth replied. "Your conductor network was designed not just to survive electromagnetic exposure, but to utilize it as an energy source. You may be the first organism in galactic history to derive biological benefit from cosmic electromagnetic phenomena." Marcus spent the next several hours in the storm, gradually increasing his exposure to higher energy levels while the monitoring team documented every aspect of his physiological response. The results were unprecedented. Instead of being destroyed by the electromagnetic fields, his modified biology was thriving in the high-energy environment. "Storm intensity is approaching Class 5 levels," Dr. Telmkiss reported. "The subject's biological functions are not just stable, they're optimized. His cardiovascular efficiency has increased by 30%, his nervous system response times have improved dramatically, and his muscle coordination is operating at peak performance levels." The realization that hit Marcus as he flew through energies that could reduce planets to electromagnetic chaos was profound. He wasn't just surviving the storm, he was becoming something adapted to thrive in environments that represented absolute barriers to normal biological life. "I want to try something," he announced to the monitoring team. "I'm going to exit the shuttle and attempt direct exposure." The response from the Probability's Edge was immediate and unanimous. Absolute prohibition of any attempt at unprotected exposure to the storm's effects. "Mr. Carey." "Chen," Commander Vex Null said firmly, "you will not exit that shuttle under any circumstances. Your survival depends on the emergency life support systems." But Marcus was already running calculations in his head. His conductor network was handling the electromagnetic load with no apparent strain. His biology was not just surviving but improving under storm exposure. The theoretical framework suggested that direct exposure might be not only survivable, but beneficial to his modified physiology. "My calculations indicate that the conductor network should provide sufficient protection for limited direct exposure," he argued. "The shuttle's life support systems are actually redundant at this point. Mr. Chen, Dr. Youthmel's voice came through the communicator. You will follow established safety protocols. Return to the ship immediately for medical evaluation and data analysis. Marcus looked out at the storm surrounding him and realized that he was experiencing something that no conscious being in galactic history had ever witnessed: the universe's most destructive forces from the inside. The electromagnetic fields that could strip atmospheres from planets and reduce starships to component atoms were flowing through his body like a natural biological process. Understood, he replied. Beginning return flight to the ship. As he turned the shuttle away from the storm's center, Marcus felt an unexpected sense of loss. The high-energy electromagnetic environment had felt like home in a way that normal space never had. His conductor network had been designed for this environment, and leaving it felt like voluntarily diminishing himself. Shuttle is clear of the storm perimeter, he reported as electromagnetic field strengths returned to normal space levels. All systems nominal. Subject is experiencing normal physiological function. The return flight to the probability's edge gave Marcus time to process what had just happened. He had survived direct exposure to a Class 5 magnetic storm energies that had destroyed every other life form that had ever encountered them. More than survived, he had thrived. Docking procedures complete, he announced as the shuttle settled into the ship's landing bay. Ready for medical evaluation and debriefing. As the bay's atmosphere was restored and Marcus emerged from the shuttle, he found himself facing a gathering of scientists whose expressions ranged from amazement to terror. He had just demonstrated that the supposedly absolute limits of biological survival were actually engineering problems waiting for the right solution. Professor Kethvar approached him with obvious concern. Mr. Chen, how do you feel? Marcus considered the question carefully.
How did he feel?
He felt like he had just discovered that he was designed for environments that existed nowhere in normal space. He felt like he had found his natural habitat in the most unnatural place in the galaxy. I feel, he said finally, like I want to go back. Dr. Zilkorth was already reviewing the data from the storm exposure, his multiple appendages moving rapidly across the analysis displays. The readings are extraordinary, he announced. The subject not only survived Class 5 electromagnetic exposure, his biological efficiency actually improved during the test. This is completely unprecedented in galactic scientific literature. Marcus realized that he had just become something unique in the galaxy, a hybrid biological electromagnetic system that could not only survive cosmic phenomena but benefit from them. The question now was what to do with this capability. Professor, he said to Kethvar, I want to know about Class 7 storms. The really dangerous ones. The professor stared at him for a long moment before responding. Chen, Class 7 storms carry energy levels that exceed the theoretical limits of matter itself. They don't just destroy biological life. They convert it to energy. Marcus nodded thoughtfully. That sounds like an interesting engineering challenge. Around him, the scientific team began to realize that they had just witnessed the emergence of something that could revolutionize galactic civilization's relationship with the universe's most destructive forces. Marcus Chen was no longer just a human being. He was humanity's answer to cosmic phenomena that operated beyond the scale of planetary civilizations, and he was looking forward to finding out what else he could survive. 2 years after his first successful storm exposure, Marcus Chen had become something of a galactic phenomenon. The recordings of his survival in Class 5 electromagnetic fields had been broadcast across civilized space, challenging fundamental assumptions about the limits of biological survival. Several species had begun their own research programs into electromagnetic adaptation, though none had yet attempted anything approaching Marcus's level of biological modification. The Galactic Council had established a special research committee to study the implications of Marcus's work, while universities across the galaxy offered courses in what was being called Chen methodology, the theoretical framework for biological survival in cosmic-scale electromagnetic environments. But Marcus himself was focused on something far more ambitious than academic recognition. Deep in the Andromeda Void, a region of space that had been abandoned for millennia, astronomical sensors had detected the formation of a Class 7 magnetic storm, the highest energy classification in galactic scientific literature. The storm was building slowly, drawing energy from the collapse of an ancient neutron star, and would reach peak intensity within 6 months. Class 7 storms were considered theoretical constructs rather than survivable phenomena. The electromagnetic energies involved exceeded anything that could exist in normal space, creating conditions where matter itself became unstable. No civilization had ever survived direct exposure to a Class 7 event. Most species' survival protocols called for evacuation to different galaxies when such storms were predicted. Marcus was planning to fly directly into its center. "This is not scientific research," Professor Cathvar said during one of their increasingly heated planning meetings aboard the specially modified research vessel Humanity's Answer. "This is an elaborate form of species-specific madness." The ship itself was a testament to the advances that had resulted from Marcus's electromagnetic research. Built using technologies derived from his conductor network designs, the Humanity's Answer was the first spacecraft capable of operating in high-intensity electromagnetic environments. Its hull incorporated thousands of conductor pathways that could channel storm energies away from critical systems, while its power plants could actually draw energy from electromagnetic fields rather than being destroyed by them. "The theoretical framework is sound," Marcus argued, reviewing calculations on his datapad. "The Class 5 storm exposure proved that the conductor network can handle electromagnetic energies far beyond normal biological limits. Class 7 represents a quantitative increase, not a qualitative change in the challenge." Dr. Zilkorth looked up from his analysis station, his manipulator arms moving in patterns that indicated extreme scientific excitement, mixed with existential terror. "The energy levels involved in Class 7 storms exceed the binding forces that hold atomic nuclei together. You would not just be exposing yourself to electromagnetic radiation. You would be entering a region of space where conventional physics may not apply." The research team aboard the Humanity's Answer represented the most advanced electromagnetic survival specialists in the galaxy. In addition to the original team members, the expedition included Dr. Vorth Kaul, a quantum physicist specializing in extreme matter states, and Commander Zara Singh, a human engineer who had helped design the ship's advanced electromagnetic systems. "From an engineering perspective," Commander Singh reported, "the ship can probably survive Class 7 exposure for limited periods. The conductor hull should be able to channel the electromagnetic energies to our power systems, but will be operating completely beyond tested parameters." Marcus had spent the 2 years since his first storm exposure undergoing additional conductor network enhancements and biological modifications. His body now contained nearly 50,000 individual conductor fibers, creating the most sophisticated electromagnetic distribution system ever integrated into living tissue. The network had become so advanced that he could actually control electromagnetic fields consciously, redirecting energy flows through different pathways in his body. "Your biological modifications have progressed far beyond our original design parameters," Dr. Yithmel observed during one of their medical evaluations. "You are no longer entirely human from a physiological perspective. The conductor network has become a symbiotic system that operates as much as an electromagnetic device as a biological organism. The transformation had not been without consequences." Marcus's appearance had changed subtly over the months of conductor integration. Thin lines of metallic conductors were visible beneath his skin, creating patterns that shifted and flowed as electromagnetic fields moved through his body. His eyes had developed an unusual reflective quality that seemed to gather and focus electromagnetic energy. When he spoke, his voice carried a slight harmonic resonance that suggested his vocal cords had been modified by the conductor integration process. "You're becoming something new," Commander Singh had observed during one of their technical discussions. "Not just a modified human, but a hybrid, electromagnetic biological entity. I'm not sure our survival protocols apply to whatever you're turning into." Marcus was aware of the changes in himself, but they felt like natural evolution rather than artificial modification. The electromagnetic sensitivity provided by his conductor network had opened sensory pathways that normal biology could never access. He could detect cosmic radiation patterns, sense the electromagnetic signatures of different star types, and actually feel the approach of magnetic storms days before conventional sensors could detect them. "The question," Professor Cathvar said during one of their final planning sessions before entering the Andromeda Void, "is whether survival in a Class 7 storm would represent the ultimate proof of your theories, or simply an elaborate way to commit suicide while advancing scientific knowledge." "There's only one way to find out," Marcus replied, studying the long-range sensor readings that showed the building storm ahead of them. "And honestly, I don't think I have a choice anymore." The conductor network was designed for this kind of challenge. Not using it would be like having wings and refusing to fly. The approach to the storm took several weeks, during which the research team conducted comprehensive studies of the electromagnetic phenomena they were encountering. The energies building around the collapsing neutron star were unlike anything in galactic scientific literature, field strengths that approached the theoretical limits of space-time itself. "Electromagnetic readings are beyond our instrument's measurement capabilities," Dr. Vorth Kaul reported as they approached the storm's outer boundaries. We are entering a region where quantum effects become macroscopic. The laws of physics as we understand them may not function normally. Marcus could feel the storm's approach through his conductor network days before their instruments detected it. The electromagnetic fields were so intense that they created a kind of pressure wave in space-time itself, distorting normal matter and energy relationships. His body responded to the cosmic energies by optimizing its conductor pathways, automatically adjusting to handle the unprecedented electromagnetic loads. Biological readings indicate that the subject's physiology is preparing for extreme electromagnetic exposure. Dr. Telmkiss reported, his conductor network is restructuring itself in response to the approaching storm. This appears to be an automatic adaptive response rather than conscious control. As they entered the storm's influence zone, the humanity's answer began experiencing effects that no spacecraft had ever encountered and survived. The ship's hull glowed with induced electromagnetic energy, creating a brilliant aurora effect that made the vessel visible from several star systems away. The power plants, instead of being overloaded by the electromagnetic interference, began generating more energy than they could use. The ship is actually drawing power from the storm, Commander Singh reported with obvious amazement. Our energy reserves are increasing rather than depleting. The conductor hull is converting electromagnetic radiation directly into usable power. Marcus prepared for what would either be the ultimate validation of his theories or the most spectacular death in galactic history. His survival suit had been modified with additional conductor pathways and redundant life support systems, though he suspected that conventional life support might be irrelevant in the electromagnetic environment he was about to enter. Final systems check, he announced to the research team. Conductor network is operating at optimal efficiency. Electromagnetic field strength is approaching class 6 levels. All biological systems are stable and responsive. Mr. Chen, Professor Kethvar said over the communication system, I want you to understand that if you proceed with direct exposure to class 7 electromagnetic fields, we will be entering completely unknown territory. No theoretical framework exists for what you are attempting. Marcus looked out at the storm that filled the viewports with swirling patterns of electromagnetic energy that operated beyond the normal spectrum of visible light. The neutron star at the storm's center was collapsing in a cascade of quantum effects that turned space itself into a kind of electromagnetic fluid. I understand, Professor, he replied, but someone has to be the first to try. He activated the shuttle's launch sequence and flew out into electromagnetic fields that exceeded the energy output of entire star systems. The moment he entered the Class 7 environment, Marcus realized that everything they had calculated about electromagnetic survival was wrong. Not incorrect, but simply inadequate to describe what was actually happening. The storm wasn't just electromagnetic energy. At Class 7 intensities, the boundary between matter and energy broke down completely. Marcus found himself flying through regions of space where his conductor network was interacting with quantum fields that existed beyond normal space-time. The electromagnetic energy wasn't just being channeled through his body. It was being integrated into his biological processes at the subatomic level. Sensor readings indicate that the subject is no longer entirely within normal space, Dr. Vorthkal reported from the research vessel. The electromagnetic fields at Class 7 intensities are creating quantum effects that transcend conventional physics. Marcus could feel himself changing as the storm's energies flowed through his conductor network. The electromagnetic fields were rewriting his biological processes at the molecular level, optimizing his physiology for survival in environments that existed beyond the normal universe. He was becoming something that had never existed before, a conscious being adapted for survival in cosmic-scale electromagnetic phenomena. Biological readings have moved beyond our measurement parameters, Dr. Telmkiss announced. The subject's physiology is no longer operating according to conventional biological principles. He appears to be deriving energy directly from quantum vacuum fluctuations. The neutron star at the storm center was visible now as a point of impossible brightness that seemed to exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously. The electromagnetic fields around it were so intense that they created visible distortions in space-time, bending light and gravity into patterns that formed a kind of cosmic mandala. Marcus realized that he could survive direct contact with the neutron star itself. His conductor network had adapted to function as a quantum electromagnetic interface, allowing him to exist safely in environments where matter and energy existed in states that had no names in any galactic language. I'm going to attempt contact with the neutron star, he announced to the research team. The response was immediate and unanimous, absolute prohibition of any attempt to approach the collapsing star. Mr. Chen, Professor Kethvar said urgently, The gravitational and electromagnetic forces at the neutron star's surface exceed anything that could theoretically support organized matter. You would be crushed to quantum foam. But Marcus was already flying toward the star, his conductor network automatically adapting to handle energy densities that existed beyond the normal universe. As he approached the neutron star's surface, he realized that conventional physics was completely inadequate to describe what was happening to him. The electromagnetic fields weren't just intense, they were creative. At the quantum level, the storm was actually generating new forms of matter and energy that existed only in the high-energy environment around the collapsing star. Marcus's conductor network was learning to process these exotic forms of energy, integrating them into his biological systems in ways that expanded his capabilities beyond anything that evolution could have produced. Contact with neutron star surface achieved, he reported to the research team. All systems stable, no adverse effects detected. He was standing on the surface of a collapsing neutron star, surrounded by electromagnetic fields that could reduce entire planets to their component atoms, and he felt completely at home. The conductor network had transformed him into something that could exist comfortably in the most extreme environment the universe could produce. The subject's biological readings indicate that he is not just surviving neutron star surface conditions. He is thriving, Dr. Vorthkow reported. His physiology is operating at efficiency levels that exceed our theoretical models by several orders of magnitude. Marcus spent several hours exploring the neutron star's surface, studying electromagnetic phenomena that no conscious being had ever observed directly. The collapsed star was generating quantum effects that created new forms of matter and energy with every second, producing an environment of constant creative destruction that operated beyond the normal laws of physics. "I need to bring some of this back with me," he announced to the research team. "There are energy forms here that could revolutionize our understanding of electromagnetic physics." Using his conductor network as a containment system, Marcus collected samples of the exotic matter being generated by the neutron star's collapse. The materials existed only in the high-energy environment of the Class 7 storm, but his biological systems could serve as a stable matrix for their continued existence. "Return flight initiated," he finally reported to the Humanities Answer. Sample collection complete. All systems optimal. As he flew away from the neutron star, Marcus realized that he had just accomplished something that would change the galaxy's understanding of what was possible. He had not only survived direct exposure to the most extreme electromagnetic phenomena in the universe, he had thrived in conditions that existed beyond the normal boundaries of space and time. "Approaching research vessel," he announced as the Humanities Answer became visible through the storm's electromagnetic aurora. "Ready for debriefing and sample analysis." As his shuttle docked with the ship, Marcus understood that he had become something unprecedented in galactic history, a conscious being that could exist comfortably in environments that represented absolute barriers to normal life. He was no longer just human. He was humanity's answer to cosmic forces that operated beyond planetary civilization's ability to comprehend. The galaxy was about to learn that the universe's most destructive phenomena could not just survived, but mastered by someone stubborn enough to refuse to accept that adaptation was impossible. Professor Kethvar met him in the shuttle bay, staring at Marcus with an expression that combined scientific fascination with existential awe. "Mr. Chen," he said quietly, "what have you become?" Marcus considered the question carefully. What had he become? He had become something that could survive in environments that existed beyond normal space-time. He had become a bridge between cosmic-scale phenomena and biological consciousness. He had become proof that evolution was not limited to natural processes that intelligence could consciously adapt to.